Hello, everybody. Good to have folks on here. We are excited. Is excited the right word? We're excited to share with you our thoughts on the 2023 legislative session upcoming, and we will just go ahead and dive in and get started. We're going to start with talking about leadership changes, and Seth and Kelly, feel free to just hop in whenever the wind moves you to do such. All right, well, let's start at the top. We have some big changes in the House. All of the leadership positions changed. So Mike Moyle from District 14. Oh, he used to be District 14, District 10 now. He is the new speaker, and we have seen him exercising his speaker rights with a variety of ways already that we can see that he'll be a different speaker than Bedke before. Seth, do you have anything that you want to chime in on with this? Any thoughts or anything that you'd like to share?
No, I mean, it's going to be certainly a different House with different leadership, and we will see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. And then our other House leadership. So we have on the Republican side, we have a new majority leader. The minority leader is the same. And then our assistant majority leader, also new. Assistant minority leader on the other side, Lauren, is the same as well. And then our caucus chairs, Dustin Manwaring was a dark horse. He didn't throw his hat into the ring until after the November election. And there were actually 3 people in that race from what we've heard. But so Dustin is now, Representative Manwaring is the new caucus chair. And then Ned Burns is also new to leadership on the minority side. He's the new caucus chair on that side. Senate leadership didn't change on the Republican side, on the majority side. So our pro tem is still Senator Winder, and majority leader is still Senator Anthony. The minority leader is new. As many of you probably are aware, Senator Stinnett retired last year. So Senator Wintrow is now the minority leader. And our assistant majority leader stayed the same. James Rutke, Senator Rutke, he just moved over to the Senate from the House, and he has a few terms under his belt in the House, and now he is the assistant minority leader in the Senate. And then Janie, the caucus chairs on both sides didn't change. They're the same as they were during the last legislative cycle. Now we want to talk to you a little bit about the makeup of the Senate. As you probably know, there was some historic turnover this year. There are 16 new Republicans and 4 new Democrats. I would like to clarify, when I say new, I mean they're new this year. Some of them may have served in prior years. For example, Ali Rabi, she was a senator a couple of years ago, and then she moved out of her district. And so she resigned, and there was someone else appointed. And then she ran in her new district and is now back in the Senate. But by the fact that she wasn't in the Senate last year and it was somebody else means that, once again, she counts towards the new Democrats, actually. So 20 out of 35 are new senators. That's a 56% turnover this year in the Senate, which is unheard of. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic, just trying to, navigate and understand where everybody is coming from, and making sure that we're building relationships with the new members, and deepening our relationships with the other members, and advocating for good, solid policy. The House, Oh. Hang on. My slides have gone rogue. Just a second. Here we go. Sorry, this should say makeup of the House at the top, not makeup of the Senate, but the graph is accurate. So the House has 29 new Republicans and 2 new Democrats, 31 total new, which is a 45% turnover. Also significant. We do see higher turnovers in redistricting years, so that explains part of it. But yeah, still significant. And the makeup, there are 59 Republicans and 11 Democrats. In not very recent past, we've seen more Democrats in the House, but with redistricting, we've seen some changes there too. So the House is also, a lot of changes, different chairs. So it will be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. And speaking of chairs, we want to go over the new committee assignments and kind of let you know who's new, and just assume most of them are new. Although with Senate Judiciary and Rules, Todd Lakey has experience. He was the chair last time around. Dan Foreman, however, is a new vice chair. And let's see, who else is new to this committee? Phil Hart, Linda Wright Hartgen, and James Rutke. He was on the House Judiciary and Rules Committee. Seth or Kelly, do you guys know, was Doug Ricks on this committee before? I cannot remember.
He was the vice chair.
Oh, that's right. Okay. And you'll find out why he's not the vice chair in a few minutes. All right, and on the House side, also have a new chair and vice chair, and quite a few new legislators are on Jude and Rules, so it's going to be a completely different dynamic. Starting with Joe Alfieri, all of the Republicans are new on that committee, and then Chris Mathias, I believe, is also new to the House Jude and Rules Committee. For those of you who have followed this pretty closely, he used to be on State Affairs, so you might remember him from that. And then Senate Local Government and Tax. This has a new chair and vice chair as well. Jeff Schroeder is a freshman, so that is a little more unusual, especially in the Senate, to have a freshman as a vice chair or a chair. But with all the turnover that we mentioned earlier, that meant that there were positions open for freshmen too. So he is a freshman. Returning, it's easier to say who's returning than who's new. Doug Ricks is a returning member. Scott Grow is a returning member. Ali Robbie, when she was here before, was on local government and taxation. So a couple years ago. Everybody else is new. Treg Burnt is just resigned as a city councilman from Meridian, so he will be an interesting piece of this new local gov and tax committee. Ben Adams was on the House Rev and Tax Committee and just came over to the Senate, so he does have some experience there. Kevin Cook is not new to the Senate, but he is new to Local Government and Taxation Committee. But Seth, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he used to be on a school board in Bonneville County. Does that sound right?
Kevin Cook, no, he was not.
Oh, okay. I was thinking he had some local government experience.
No, Senator Lent was on a school board,
yes.
but not Senator Cook.
Okay. All right, and moving on. Also, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the name of the House or the Senate Tax Committee is Senate Local Government and Tax. In the House, those are divided. So we have a House Local Government Committee, and this committee has significant turnover as well. has a new chair with Barbara Ehart, and I believe Mike Kingsley was the vice chair last time around. Lance Clow is returning. Marco Erickson is returning. Bruce Skog and John Weber are returning. And everyone else on the Republican side is new to the committee. Steve Birch is returning. And I believe I'm apologizing ahead of time because I misspelled Brooke Green. Sorry about that. I'll fix that before we post these slides anymore. And Sonia Galaviz is a new House member, so also new. Now let's talk about the House Taxation Committee. So House Revenue and Taxation. So we have a new chair and vice chair, Jason Monks. Jason hasn't served on the Rev and Tax Committee before, so this will be new, but I think he's eager to learn and willing to listen. So that is a good thing to note. Dave Cannon has served on the committee and he's the new vice chair. For those of you that may not be familiar, he's from Bingham County over in Blackfoot. And then Sage Dixon is returning. Dustin Manwaring is returning. John Weber is returning. Shepard is returning. The rest of the Republicans are new, except Gerald Raymond. Seth, was he on Rev and Tax when he was in the House before? So he is new back to the House. He lost in the last election cycle, but he ran again this time and is returning to the House. Can you remember?
He was on House Education.
Okay, so yeah, basically from Rick Cheatham through Kenny Roten, they are all new to Rev and Tax, but not all necessarily unfamiliar with taxation issues. Rick Cheatham is on the City Council in Chubbuck, and Jeff Cornelis was on the City Council for a short time in Nampa. So we do have some local government experience. And then Ned Burns is new to Rev and Tax this year. Senate State Affairs. So our Senate State Affairs Committee is new based on the fact that Patty Ann Lodge was the chair and she retired last year. Jim Guthrie is the new chair. He's from Bannock County. And Treg Burnt, another freshman, is the vice chair. Treg, as I mentioned before, just recently resigned from the Meridian City Council. So comes from a local government background. And Ben Taves is a new freshman as well. So Ben Taves and James Rudke and Melissa Wintrow are all new to the Senate State Affairs Committee. And then on the House side, we have a returning chair, and Julianne Young is new to being the vice chair, but she was on this committee before. Joe Palmer and Representative Barbieri, Holtzclaw, Heather Scott, Kevin Andrus, Bruce Skog are all returning. The other Republicans are new, and Colin Nash is also new to House State Affairs. And then on the Senate Transportation side, we have a new chair, and he is also a new senator. He did serve one term in the House, but now he moved over to the Senate and he's the new chair. And that is an interesting dynamic as well, because the vice chair, Lori Den Hartog, some of you may be familiar with, she was the chair last time around. And then Chuck Linder is, he always serves on transportation. That's one of his favorite committees. So he is not new, but everyone else on this committee is new, aside from, I think, I'm not positive, but I think that Allison Robbie, when she was in the Senate before, served on this committee. But everyone else, they are all freshmen senators that are on Senate Transportation. So there'll be a lot of opportunities to educate and help them understand how, what happens at the county level when it comes to transportation issues. So on the House side, there is a little bit more experience still on the House committee. Joe Palmer is a returning chair. Brandon Mitchell is new to the vice chair position. Sage Dixon, Representative Holtzclaw, Representative Blanksma, Dustin Manwaring, Charlie Shepard are all experienced members of the Transportation Committee, but the rest of the Republicans are new freshmen that have not served on the committee before, aside from Steve Miller and Julie Yamamoto. Steve is a freshman, but he comes with experience. He's served in the House before in the past. And then John Gannon and Ned Burns are not new to the Transportation Committee in the House. And now we would like to go over our IAC legislative priorities. So the way that the priorities work, just as a reminder, a refresher, is that each year the county officials will submit policy recommendations. They submit resolutions to IAC, and then those resolutions are put into a packet, and the resolutions are voted on by the committees that they're assigned to at our annual conference. And then once that conference is, then if they make it out of the committee, then they are recommended to the general membership, and the general membership votes. So this year there was 22 resolutions originally submitted, and 16 passed the general body. Then it's up to the legislative committee to prioritize based on those 16 resolutions that passed, and they are allowed to prioritize up to 5 resolutions according to IAC bylaws. So following IAC bylaws, we have 5 resolutions that are our priorities for 2023. So the first one is election recount fees. And this one, the original language or proposal was for the recount fee that is currently $100 to be increased. They weren't sure on an exact amount. It was mentioned $400 or $500, but that was, just that's negotiable. But the main point is that it hasn't been changed since 1957, and the costs outweigh the amount that is paid for these recounts. This does not include recounts that can be automatically made. So if you are within 0.01% of the other candidate that you're racing against, if the election comes down to 0.01%, then the losing candidate can request a recount, and that recount is at no cost. The county covers those costs. But if it's more than 0.01%, then that $100 per precinct kicks in. So that's the update on that. And then Seth, do you want to cover the preliminary levy rate?
Yes. So the other priority is essentially what we view as cleanup from House Bill 389 from a few years ago. As you recall, when the law was changed 2 years ago, instead of using a prior year levy rate to determine what your new construction amount is, counties and other taxing districts are required to basically estimate a preliminary levy rate and then apply that levy rate to their new construction amount. Administratively, it is burdensome and difficult to accomplish, in particular for the smaller districts, which the counties often have to assist with a lot of hand-holding. And so we will be in conversation with legislators about what alternatives there are that might simplify the process. We've already had conversations with the chairman of the House Revenue and Taxation Committee. He's open to the discussion. I know that the new speaker, Representative Moyle, is also open to having the conversation. And so, we've initiated the conversation. What I don't know yet is what they're willing to sign off on. And so we will be working to identify that early on in the session and see if there's a better alternative for us. I think the challenge for us is, evaluating which direction the legislature will want to go if a bill is introduced, and whether that's better or worse for local governments. And so I've been compiling data from the State Tax Commission so that we can run the numbers and do a comparison of what new construction would have been had we been using a prior year levy rate versus the preliminary levy rate and try to find a middle ground of a position, again, that we can move forward that makes it easier on counties. And also, at the end of the day, provides, consistency with some of the direction of House Bill 389.
All right.
Right. Kelly.
I'm going to talk about the cleanup for House Bill 735. If you recall, House Bill 735 was our public defense / catastrophic healthcare program bill. It repealed the indigent program as well as the CAP board as of July 1, 2023. We realized coming into that bill and, the process that we were going to have some unintended consequences and some items left that needed to be cleaned up. One of the unintended consequences was in regards to jail medical claims. The sheriff's office has the ability, or did have the ability, to price their claims at the reimbursement rate, which is located in the indigent statutes. By removing that definition of reimbursement rate, there was a fear that the sheriffs would not be able to utilize that reimbursement rate. And so this cleanup bill proposal would add the definition for the reimbursement rate into the two sections that talk about jail medical, so that they can continue to utilize that lower rate. The catastrophic healthcare program currently receives $5 from every seatbelt citation, and that is part of their revenue stream. As the CAP program goes away, that $5 needs to go somewhere. This proposal would leave that $5 at the county level. The county would not be required to remit that to the state, and then it would not go into the general fund. The amount as a total is not a lot. Across the state for FY 2022, it was just over $30,000, but that is money that you can keep in your general fund and use as you need it. So we're going to propose that. Settlements for CAT, or for indigent and CAT claims. There is a current process in place that if an individual has an outstanding debt, they're able to come to the county and ask for a settlement. If that settlement is 75% or greater of the debt owed, the county is able to settle on the state's behalf. Well, as again, the CAP board is going away, that policy goes away. And so we're looking to see if we need to add language to statute for that settlement process. And if we don't, then, who is going to make that policy decision? We anticipate that the threshold will be similar, but we want to make sure that all individuals are considered, and that we may not want to eliminate the ability for somebody to come in and offer a lower rate, percentage rate, and settle. So those are still negotiations, and we'll have more forthcoming. We need to extend the life of the CAP board. House Bill 735 had the CAP board to sunset July 1, 2023. However, after the bill was passed, we realized that the board still has some obligations after the end of the fiscal year that they need to take care of. And with the repeal of the program, it doesn't, they can still do it, but it doesn't really give them the authority to. And that comes along with expending funds. So we're required to do an audit. We'll have to pay for that audit, provide the audit to the state, and complete our annual report. So the CAP board, only for those functions, will be extended for an additional 3 months through the end of the county fiscal year, ending at the end of September. And I believe that's it for that one.
All right, Seth, do you want to take on the vapor products tax?
Yeah, so another one of our priorities is to advance legislation that would establish a tax, basically a product tax on vape-related products. We have had conversations over the last couple of years with legislators about doing this, and have met strong resistance from the tobacco lobby. And we anticipate that we'll run into similar challenges this next session. I've had a brief conversation with the chairman of the House Health and Welfare Committee. He's not overly enthusiastic about this proposal, so we've got some work to do there. And as I mentioned, at least one of the big tobacco companies I know will be actively lobbying against it. So, and their interest in this is that this particular tobacco company has purchased a number of vape products and is selling those vape products under their brands. And so we do have a heavy lift on that front, but we'll continue to work on the issue and update the membership as we proceed through the session.
Thanks, Seth. Do you want to take the last one, or do you want me to do it? I'm fine either way.
I can handle it really quickly. So, as all of you recall from House Bill 562, there now is no longer a deadline to apply for the homeowners exemption. As a result, counties have had to cancel significant dollar amounts of taxes. I think it was over $6 million this last year, because of applications that came in after values were set and budgets were finalized and levies were certified. And so we have worked over the last year or so with Representative McCann from up in Lewiston, and she plans to advance a piece of legislation to allow counties to prorate on a quarterly basis. And so we will be working on that issue. We also are in litigation right now with the State Tax Commission over their interpretation of the law. The counties of Latah County and Lincoln County have challenged essentially the position of the State Tax Commission that counties cannot prorate. IAC has filed an amicus brief in the case. And so we're hoping that there's court resolution at some point in the next couple of months. The briefs that were drafted by the counties are very strong, and the amicus that was drafted by our attorneys is also strong. And so I think we're in a good position with the courts. It's just a matter of what we can get the legislature to do. So, and with that, Sarah, it might be a good time now to pause and see if there are any questions or comments from the audience.
You read mine and Kelly's minds. So yes. It doesn't look like we have any in the, oh, I think we might have one.
There is a comment.
And feel free to just raise your hand too.
We do have a comment from Bill Thompson. He mentions it looks like the judge will be hearing this in early February.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, any other?
There are a couple of hands up.
Doug and John Crozier both that have their hands raised. So Doug, why don't we start with you?
All right, Doug, go ahead. You need to unmute.
Okay, my question goes back to the preliminary levy rate. How much of a lift is that going to be for us as an association to educate legislators on this screw up, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Yeah, Doug, I don't think the lift is going to be very significant. I think what's going to be significant is what certain legislators might ask for in exchange for eliminating the preliminary levy rate. And that's where it's going to get interesting. We'll have to kind of make a decision as to what the legislature is willing to do versus what the law currently allows. The one concern I have is we're looking at market values is we are starting to see those values taper off. And so we're, if the values taper off, we're not going to see these massive swings. And it may be to the point where even though the preliminary levy rate is burdensome to work with, it's better than the alternatives that the legislature might present. They might say, okay, we'll eliminate the preliminary levy rate, but you're only going to, you'll only be allowed to budget 75% of new construction, for example. And that's what we've got to sort through and do the analysis to see which is, which is the better situation for counties to be in.
Thank you.
John Crozier, it looks like your hand went down. Did you have a question?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it
Any
looks
other-
like there is a question from BJ in Latah County regarding property tax reform. There are a lot of property tax reform efforts, BJ, and we've got a few slides on property tax reform. So we'll get to that here in a moment.
Any other questions on anything we've covered so far? All right, well, let's move on. All right, Seth, BJ opened it up, teed it off for you.
So to this point, there are 4 items that are actively being pursued with legislators, and IAC has actually been involved in conversations on all 4 of these items. The last bullet point is proration of the homeowner's exemption. I've already touched on that, so I'm not going to go into detail there, as that's one of our priorities. But these other 3 items, I do want to talk a little bit about. The first one is really simple. As you all know, the legislature has instituted a cap on circuit breaker eligibility. It was originally at 125% of median value. It went up to, I believe, 175% of median assessed value in a county. There are legislators that would like to eliminate the cap if possible on market value. But at minimum, there's discussion of increasing that eligibility threshold to between 200 and 250% of county median assessed value. But the goal is to eliminate that cap altogether. There's a pretty big effort underway to get the governor to make this one of his priorities as well, and he seems open to it. And so there likely will be changes to the circuit breaker to expand eligibility to individuals who really need it. The other one that is very simple, I'm going to jump over bullet point number 2 on your screen and go to bullet point number 3. Representative Bruce Skog, who is from Canyon County, has drafted legislation that would increase the homeowner's exemption from where it's at right now, which is about $125,000. It would increase it up to in the neighborhood of $225,000. So it would be a significant one-time increase, and then it would be indexed moving forward. And so it would, again, significantly increase the amount of the exemption and bring back the index. And he has, I think, roughly 40 co-sponsors that have signed off on the bill. It also has a provision that would increase the amount eligible for the exemption from 50% to 55% of your home's taxable market value up to whatever that cap is. And the intent of going from 50% to 55% is to mitigate the shift that would occur from high dollar homes onto low dollar homes. And so if you don't increase that threshold from 50% to 55%, part of that tax shift that would occur would not only shift onto agriculture and commercial, but it also would shift onto kind of the homes at the bottom end of the market valuation. And so that's the intent of adjusting it from 50% to 55%. Also, as a component of that, there's some language in the bill that would also address the circuit breaker issue. And again, very simple, very straightforward, easy to understand. And that bill will likely be introduced. It'll become a question of how much leadership will support it and allow it to advance. The final property tax relief proposal that's out there is a proposal that Senator Groh has been working on. And I was given permission this morning to share the draft itself. So we'll start circulating that draft, in particular to the assessors, clerks, and treasurers, who will see an administrative impact with this proposal. The idea is to take 4.5% annually from sales tax collections. The 4.5% would come after revenue sharing, so there wouldn't be an impact on revenue sharing. It's estimated that the 4.5% would generate upwards of $150 million in the first year. That $150 million would be used to reduce property taxes on owner-occupied residential properties. And so it essentially, the county and any other taxing district would go through the process of approving and certifying their budget. And then, like the circuit breaker, these dollars would come in and be applied to the property taxes of anyone who owns their own home to reduce the amount that is actually levied. So from an administrative standpoint, it would require the county assessor to produce a homeowner's roll, so to speak. There is a deadline as it's drafted that it would be the homeowner's roll as of, I think, the first week in August. And that is done, the deadline's in place to essentially prevent people from receiving the benefit after budgets have been set. That would create a lot of chaos where there is no date right now no deadline to apply for the homeowner's exemption. So the assessor would produce a new roll that would then be provided to the county clerk. The county clerk then would have to match up the information on that roll with the budget and levy information and provide that to the state tax commission, who then would code for those counties that rely on the state tax commission for coding their property tax notices. They would then code the property tax notices to reflect. It's not going to be as complicated as what the governor made it out to be with the governor's public safety initiative. It'll be handled on the tax notice, just like the circuit breaker. So there won't be any funky wording on there about the governor's public safety initiative and tax relief. It'll be simple, straightforward. But for those counties that code their own tax bills, I think we've got like Kootenai County, Canyon County, Ada County in those categories. You would likely have to recode to some extent your tax bills to accommodate this. The good thing is, if this thing moves forward, we'll know early enough in the process that those changes can be made. So again, there will be an administrative impact on counties if this bill moves forward, but it will provide, upwards of $150 million of ongoing property tax relief to those who own their homes. And it would leverage existing sales tax money so that the state would not have to increase sales tax. And so, I think a good way to look at this would be a circuit breaker for anyone who owns their home. This exemption would be applied for those individuals that receive the circuit breaker. This property tax relief program would be applied first, and then whatever else is left over, the current circuit breaker program we have in place would apply then to those that are eligible, seniors and disabled veterans. There still are some details to be worked out. I haven't reviewed in full the draft because I just received it. But again, we'll be sharing that with counties for your feedback. It's my understanding that the Senate is very, they're viewing this proposal very positively. The governor is open to it because it's a means of providing property tax relief to homeowners without raising sales tax and without implementing further budget caps on local units of government. Senator Grow, who is the main proponent of the proposal, has been very, very direct with me in this, that he has no intention of capping budgets or revenues to cities and counties. In his view, the legislature has already capped us between the 3% and then with House Bill 389. And so he sees no reason to implement further caps. Instead, he would like, again, to take state dollars and apply them towards property taxes to help on the owner-occupied side of things. The credit would only be applied, and this is where it gets a little tricky, it would only be applied to non-school district levies. So the levies that school districts have would not be eligible for this property tax relief. It would only be applied to cities, counties, and other special purpose districts. So again, we'll get the information out and we'll look forward to the feedback and see what everybody thinks with the draft itself. With that, I'm actually going to pause for a moment, and it looks like we've got a few questions. So I'm going to try to address those questions. And if anyone wants to raise your hand, feel free to do that. We have again from BJ, will dedicating sales tax collection to property tax programs result in reducing the sales tax apportionment to cities and counties? It's a great question, BJ. The answer to that is no. The way the bill is drafted, the amount that's made available for property tax relief would be determined after the amounts of revenue sharing to be distributed to cities and counties is calculated. So it would have no impact on current revenue distributions to cities and counties, which is a positive. The other question from Doug, is this going to affect the new ongoing monies for roads and bridges in the sales tax initiative? Again, Doug, the answer is no. It's calculated after the TECM money for roads and bridges is calculated. And so there shouldn't be an impact on that distribution as well. Again, that's one of the positive things in here, is that it won't impact any of the state revenue sharing that comes, whether it's for transportation or for ongoing. And then from Donna Spear, have you heard anything about a bill from SCOG for tax reform? You might not have caught it, Donna, but that's the homeowners exemption bill that he's moving forward. And again, just to recap that, it would increase the amount of the homeowners exemption from 125,000 up to 225,000, and then reinstitute the index on the homeowners exemption. So those are the answers to the questions that have come in. Does anyone have their hand raised? It doesn't look like that. So again, if there are any questions, feel free to continue to type them in. We'll answer them as they come forward, and then we'll get more information on the proposal out to everyone for your feedback.
All right, as I mentioned earlier, House Bill 735 from the last session included public defense. It was the intent and the directive of House Bill 735 that there be a new model in place, or a recommended model to come to the legislature this next session. So IAC worked with various stakeholders to put together a working group. It is kind of a large working group. We have 6 commissioners. We have Dan Denning from Boundary County, Don Hall from Twin Falls County, Doug Zenner from Nez Perce County, Brent Mendenhall from Madison County, Mark Bear from Bingham, and Rod Beck from Ada County. I want to take a moment to thank them for their input. This has been, quite the discussion, and their feedback has been very vital. I appreciate their attendance and input on this working group. We worked with the governor's office. They have 2 staffers that have been meeting with us, as well as a handful of public defenders. So this working group has met a handful of times. It is their charge to come up with a recommendation to the legislature for a new public defense model. We need to have that plan in place, as the transition will happen and need to be completed by October 2024, which is the beginning of the fiscal 25 year. And so far, most have been fairly comfortable, and what we may see, more likely see, is a regional model. There's been a couple ideas thrown around, one being similar to the state appellate public defender, where the state appellate public defender is the executive director, and then he has his unit chief and his staff underneath him. In something like this, we would have your executive director, and then you would have a unit chief in our regional model, a unit chief in each of the regions, the judicial districts, and then they would have their staff underneath of them. We've also been looking at the Judicial Council as a model, which consists of a board, and it's 7 members. It is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a district judge, 2 attorneys appointed by the Idaho State Bar, and then 3 non-attorneys appointed by the governor. So this model is we're looking at this as well. There's been a lot of discussion back and forth about the governance for public defense. And what this working group really is trying to accomplish is a balance between the executive branch oversight and the public defenders themselves, and who is going to determine the policies that will come in the transition. we want to make sure that the executive branch has their authority, as this is now a state program, but we want to make sure that the local voices are heard as well. So that is a quick overview of public defense, and hopefully pretty soon we will have some drafts to share.
Do we have any questions on that?
How will they handle conflict attorneys? As far as I am understanding it, the conflict attorneys would stay the same. The state could contract as they do with any other type of service, and they can contract directly with conflict attorneys. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about where you come in as members. We will be advocating for these policies, but we are only as strong as our membership, for sure. And our membership has really stepped up to the plate in at least since I've been here in the last 3 years, and hopefully that momentum continues. So thought we would leave you with some tips for success. First of all, make sure, if you haven't yet, with so many new freshmen especially, that you work on developing a personal relationship with your legislators. We want counties to be, the county officials to be the people that they call when they see a bill that affects counties. If they see something that has to do with the homeowners exemption, we want their first call to be their county assessor. If they see something that has to do with elections, we want the first call to be the county clerk. So definitely want to encourage that relationship. Give them your cell phone number, hopefully get theirs so that you can contact them, because they get 1,000 emails a day sometimes. So emailing will be, if there's an issue that you want to discuss with them, an email will probably be too late. So another tip is to never lie, even if it pains you to tell the truth. Tell the truth, because it helps with credibility for you as an individual, but also for the counties as a whole, and just making sure that we are, sharing facts and data and not exaggerating. It's all very important. Be patient is another tip. Just last year, I think, is a really great example of the patience that our members had with public defense. I can't count how many times Seth would come back from walking across the street, and Kelly, and they'd say, "Public defense is dead." Or I would say it too, like all three of us, but thankfully not all at the same time. So somebody else would say, no, there's still a way, we can still do this, and we just keep working the issue, and our members kept working the issue, our legislative committee kept working the issue. If you have questions, reach out to your legislative committee. If you don't feel like things are moving fast enough, there's that patience again. But reach out to your representatives on the legislative committee, because they are really good and they know what's happening, know what's going on. When you're reaching out to legislators, same thing. They're, like I said, getting 1,000 emails a day, have committee meetings and commitments, and so just trying to, and also are learning and have different things that they're balancing too. So being patient with them also goes a long way. And with that comes courtesy. I think that one's pretty obvious. Another is, if you do get a chance to meet with them or talk to them on the phone, be brief. Make sure that you're getting to the point and that you're explaining what you're talking about succinctly. I think I skipped. Did it again. Sorry, guys. As I explain things unsuccinctly. Oh, here we go. We're back. And then making sure that you're keeping it simple. So back to the succinctly, explain it in a way that they can understand. Some people have different, levels of experience with county government. So, some of them are former county commissioners. They might know exactly what you're talking about. And someone else might have never really had any experience with county government except when they receive their property tax notice in the mail. So keeping it simple is always a good thing on that end. And once again, if you're meeting with a group of legislators or one legislator, especially keep your group small so that it doesn't feel intimidating or like you're trying to threaten or cajole. And also it just makes the conversation run more smoothly and more easily if they're, if they don't feel uncomfortable. And then plan what you want to say. Make sure, if you need to write it down, practice it out loud. All good things, especially if you're giving testimony. Make sure you write out your testimony and have bullet points and data to back up what you're going to say. A lot of times testimony is timed almost all the time now. Just about every committee, they will give you a certain amount of time and you can watch a clock ticking down, which is actually really nice because you know when somebody else's time is up too. But so you need to have your elevator pitch ready to go and then practice it. But don't forget to make your ask. When you get to the end and you have, if you want them to vote yes on XYZ, make sure you ask them in the end to vote yes on XYZ. Because otherwise they might walk away from that meeting going, well, it was really nice to see so-and-so, but I really don't know what they wanted. So it might seem obvious to us, but it might not be to them. So make the ask. And then always just encourage you to follow up with a thank you. In that thank you, you can remind them, about what you discussed. And I also encourage you to time your thank you, make sure it's prompt after the discussion, so that they remember, oh yeah, we met and that's right, that was a good conversation. So those are, just some simple tips that can go a long ways. And then wanted to let you know, who you can contact. So if you have anything really under the sun, Seth, Kelly, and I are always happy to help however we can. Seth, especially on property taxes, he's the guy. So if you have property tax questions or looking for data or anything, send those Seth's way. I hope Seth and Kelly don't mind. I actually know they don't, but I'm giving out their contact information. All three of us are happy to answer cell phone calls or texts. In fact, that's the best way to get a hold of the three of us as opposed to our office number, because a lot of times, especially during the session, we're not in our offices. But really year round, we're out, in the counties and stuff. So for me, if you have any issues that relate to intergovernmental affairs, I'm your gal, transportation and infrastructure. Feel free to reach out to me and I will help you however I can. And then just, in general, like I said, contact all three of us. Kelly specializes, as you can probably tell from her slides, on justice and public safety issues and also on public lands. So if you have any questions related to either of those two topics, Kelly's the one to contact there. And then Kenny Houston, thought I would at least show you his face here. So Kenny is our new graduate research assistant, and Kenny is working on a county fact book, which will be really helpful for us when we are working with the legislature. And so that means he also has a lot of data right now. So if you're looking for data, reach out to us and we can help Kenny get a lot of information to you and in a nice form that is easily explainable. So feel free to reach out on any data issues to any of us three really, but that's Kenny's contact information as well. And then some other resources as we're going into this session, watch for our legislative bulletin. So that will start going out after the governor gives his State of the State address. So we'll get it out either that afternoon or the following morning with a summary of that. And that kicks off our legislative bulletin. It comes out every week on Mondays. And we usually highlight what is the most pertinent issues that we're facing that week, as well as calls to action. There is something else that I forgot to put on here, but it's legislative alerts. So once in a while, the weekly newsletter is not enough. It's not fast enough. That legislative bulletin, you know, there's an issue that's coming and we know the vote's going tomorrow, and it's, you know, just fly by the seat of your pants time. I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but I've said it, so it's done now. Sorry, guys. Then you would get a legislative alert, and it's distinctly clear that it's different. You know, it has red background, and that means please, please, please call your legislators and let them know what's going on. We usually have some talking points in there, and you can also contact us with questions so that you feel comfortable knowing what to say. So keep an eye out for those as well. And then we also do a live weekly update via webinar. So just like this, or it might be just a regular Zoom, so that we can see your faces too. But that is your opportunity to ask us what's happening that week. We'll go through our legislative agenda for legislative committee meetings. So you'll know everything that we have been talking about as a committee, or, you know, that the committee has been discussing. And we just give an update on what's happening that week. We also have our bill tracker, so you can keep an eye on that. We update that almost daily. Once things start moving in the legislature, it is daily, so that you can tell where, you know, a bill is and whether or not you need what position IAC has taken on it, if any. And then the legislature.idaho.gov is also a great resource where you can find, you know, the committee hearings. You can find out the agendas. You can find how to stream them from that website. And then our website is always, you know, chock full of information as well. And then we also produce an IAC legislative action guide that has those tips that I went over earlier today, as well as we are releasing a new version in January, and it will have the links to the contact information for the legislators and the various other information that we find pertinent to include this year. So with that, are there any other questions? Any? All right, we did it, guys. We made it in an hour. Any closing thoughts, Seth or Kelly?
Nope.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a happy
Merry
holidays.
Christmas.